Jolene, welcome back to the Degrassi Kid podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, Jocelyn. Hello, friends. I'm glad to be back
I'm excited. As we know, you are a frequent sponsor of the Degrassi Kid podcast, and today you wanted to talk about all the key topics that they cover across multiple Degrassi generations from the beginning to the end. Why is that a topic that you wanted to talk about today?
because I just love how they all link together about the Degrassi franchise and everything. And it's kind of neat how they kind of like each generation is a different decade
Mm.
and but they talk about the same topic and how more information is more out there.
Yeah, I like that. I'm excited. Thank you so much for sponsoring this. It's always so cool to get to talk to you, and I think today's topic is going to be really fun. Let's dive in. The very first topic that you wanted to talk about was abortion, specifically what it looks like over the years, how it changed, what part of each abortion storyline stood out to you. Overall, how do you think Degrassi did in talking about abortion? And then we'll go through each character one by one.
I think they really touched good base on abortion because that's a really touchy subject because there are like pros and cons and people are for it and against it, and the way they did it in each decade, that's how it usually was. So
Yeah.
they did a really good job at not like discriminating or like making any biased statements about that
I agree. I agree.
because it's a very touchy subject on abortion.
I think it's interesting how it changes over the years, and I'm curious on your opinion about how they did with Heather and Erica. I can say my favorite part about the Heather and Erica storyline is how they had two girls who grew up in the same household, same parents, same religious upbringing, but the big difference was Erica was actually going through it, and Heather just kind of had her opinions about it. I thought it was really cool. Even the same bedroom they grew up in, and they have such different points of view
Mhm.
about it. I'm
Mhm.
curious your takeaway from the Heather and Erica abortion storyline.
I kind of agree with that. And I loved how they see it. And just because they're twins doesn't mean they see eye to eye. I mean,
Mhm.
Erica was going through it and she's like, I'm too young. I know Spike had a baby, but I can't do it. And it was her opinion. And then Heather's like, it's wrong. You're killing a baby. And I just loved how at the end, spoilers alert for anyone listening if they haven't seen it. Degrassi High. I just like how even though she was against it, it's still her twin sister. They're still close. She still showed up because she couldn't let her do it alone. I mean, I'm just glad they showed like they both had different opinions.
I agree. Yeah.
As twins may look alike, but they have opinions of their own.
Yeah, they're
And
two
that's what
individual
people
people.
need to know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I'm curious. We're going to go through each one. So we'll talk about how these storylines changed over the years. But the next one is Manny. The thing that stood out to me that I loved about Manny's storyline is that she goes to Spike, who is also wrapped up in kind of the Heather Erica era of the world.
Mhm.
But I did think it was interesting that I actually think they kind of went backwards on the topic because Heather and Erica's generation, they had that whole classroom discussion talking about the pros and cons of abortion. Whereas Manny was a
Mhm.
much more like solitude thing. They didn't even say the word abortion that much. I actually think they kind of went backwards in that. What do you think about Manny's storyline? What stood out to you?
I know it was very interesting because Manny's abortion was around in the early 2000s, and you would think they would show her actually going into the clinic. They only showed her talking to the doctor about it, but
Mm.
they showed where it was early 90s, which you would think in that time frame. I know you weren't born then, but it wasn't really. They had protesters, and it's like I was shocked that they didn't show that in Manny's. They just showed her going to the doctor because in
Mm.
Heather and Erica, they showed protesting her walking up to the clinic and people like, this is your unborn child. And they should have, I thought they would have did a little bit more like having her walked inside the clinic getting it done and stuff.
Yeah, I
It was
agree. I think
like backwards. It was like backwards, but
yeah, I think it's a testament to how Degrassi reacts to like what's going on in the world at the time because I do think a discussion about abortion became so much more like versus against each other versus just talking about it and then letting the person decide what they wanted to do.
Mhm.
Now Tessa also did have an abortion in Degrassi Schools Out, but I don't really I'm not saying it doesn't count, but it feels so like we don't really like talk about it. We just kind of see that she's at the clinic. She makes an appointment for herself. But is there anything about Tessa's abortion storyline that stood out to you?
Um, not really. I
Yeah.
mean, just like I think she knew that Joey wasn't really committed to her, and she didn't really want, they could elaborate like, okay, well, he's not committed to me, he's still in love with Caitlyn and stuff. So then they should have, like, that's why she didn't want to keep the baby. Like, why should I keep the baby? And she's not, and she's also not ready to be a mom too. They should
Yeah.
have like kind of touched base why she was getting the abortion, you know.
I agree. I do think they kind of, for how much like emphasis they put on their first abortion storyline with Erica, I was kind of shocked that they kind of just let it kind of fall to the wayside. But that is the reality. Some girls just go get abortions and they don't like talk about it with people. They just do it, and it's a
Yep.
solitude thing.
And
So
that's probably the reason why they didn't touch base. They wanted to show
yeah,
that. I feel like maybe that's why they wanted to show that.
yeah,
To
I
like
agree.
say, I just want to do it and get it over with. I don't need my mom's consent. I just gonna do it.
Yeah,
Then somebody questions, oh, were you pregnant? Da, da, da. Why'd you do that?
yeah,
Some people are
exactly.
quiet. And maybe that's why they did it with Manny too. Like, yeah, she went with her mom and stuff, but like she just, even though Emma was like, oh, you shouldn't, but she still was supportive. Like, it's her body, it's her choice. Just like
Exactly.
Heather. Regardless, Emma was against it. That's why I liked it, because Emma was like Heather. They were best friends, sisters, whatever. They were against the abortion, but they still supported their friend and sister.
Exactly, exactly. Which is a kind of differentiates itself when we get to Lola. Lola at the start of the episode, she knows that she's going to have an abortion. She doesn't have
Yep.
to go through this debate about whether it's right or wrong. She says, "I'm going to do it." She confides in the L, and they go. And the biggest thing is we get to watch the procedure happen on camera. What's your biggest takeaway from Lola's?
I was not surprised, because that was in like 2014, 15. People knew about more about the abortion. They did their research, and they probably, that was a later time in the 2000s. And maybe they actually said, oh, let's actually get this show what's going on and how an abortion, and then open it up more. And plus Lola was just like an outstanding character. That actress says
Oh,
you need to get her.
I know. I did send her a DM, but we'll see if she ever answers me.
But I just, that's how my intake is. I feel like, because it was more research, and it was what, when did that show come out? 2014, 15.
Somewhere around there, 16 or something like that.
Yeah, so it was like, I think they just like, oh, they touched based on like Manny's abortion, but wasn't really a description. And then that was early 2000. But then, later on in the 2000s, they're like, let's show a little bit more what an abortion looks like, or like what it is like with the procedure. And
Yeah, I think that's huge. It really demystifies what the procedure is like for us to sit there through it and see that it's so short. And the question when she says, "Am I the first 16-year-old who ever done this to?" and he says, "You're not the first today." Like that is, I
that,
think
I
one of the
know that
best
was,
moments.
that
I
was
love
like,
that.
wow.
I agree, and I remember Stefan Brogren had said something like, whenever we found out we were going in the into the abortion clinic to the procedure, I thought, wow, I can't believe we're doing this, and then I immediately thought, I can't we haven't believe we haven't done this at all. So I think that's the best storyline from that era of Degrassi, in my opinion, is Lola's abortion storyline.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Now, Jolene, I'm curious if they were going to do an abortion storyline today, what do you think it would look like?
Wow.
I know,
I
right?
think it would be more the Degrassi franchise if they did a
Yeah.
reboot.
Hmm.
You never know. It could be a reboot. Hint, hint, huh?
I hope so.
I think they would show like a bigger storyline, even bigger than Lola's, like having that story, like getting pregnant, talking to the boyfriend or whoever the father is, stepping up and say, do I really want it? And maybe the boyfriend will come in and be supportive about having an abortion, and actually walking into the clinic, because we only see Lola inside the clinic, like actually walking up the stairs to the clinic, talking to the doctor, and then scheduling it, and then going back the next day. I think they would do more elaborate. That's what I would see, because it's 2025. I think it would be more of a, because abortion is, now there's even more research about it, and
Mhm.
people are more aware of it. I think back in 90 it was aware, and but it wasn't talked about. That's why it was like touchy subject, and people are like, oh, what's abortion? It's a very touchy subject, but Degrassi, Linda, and Stephen did a very good job at touching base and not trying to just like go like, negative and positive. Like they showed it in a
Mm.
right way. That's how I see it, and they did it right because those topics are like, woo.
I know. I think they did such a great job. I would like to see well, actually, I think two things would happen. One, what I loved about the Erica one is that we got to see how it affected her because, later, like she has someone who's like Liz, who is very against the fact that she had one. It's like affecting her relationships in the future. And in Manny and Lola, they didn't show that a lot. In Manny's case, they didn't show it at all. So I would like to see how it affects someone afterwards because that's something I don't have insight about. But I do think if a new one came out, I think Lola's didn't have a lot of like the pros and cons of people debating. I do think given our current political climate, they would probably have a lot of people against it because now, especially with America, that topic has come up again and it's legal in certain places, there's all these consequences. So that's what I think would change. I think I would hopefully they would show the consequences afterwards, and I do think they would have to again react to the political climate of what's really going on where people are so ignorant about it these days.
Yeah.
I think. Okay, I think we talked about the abortion storyline. Is there anything you want to say before we move on to the next topic?
No, I think we touched base and all that.
Yeah,
I think it was just a very brave and good topic that they chose.
I
And
know.
hopefully, if there's a reboot, they do it even more, like I said, like a broader, because, it's not talked about, like you said. So I'm glad they touched it's because it's a hard topic to talk about. And
It is. And I
it's
do
like,
think it's one that would come up in every iteration that they do. I think it will be.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah.
The next topic that we wanted to talk about was LGBTQ storylines on Degrassi. We're going to go all the way from Glenn in Degrassi Junior High down to Tristan in Degrassi Next Class. But first, just your overall opinions before we get into each person individually. How do you think Degrassi did overall in telling stories about queer characters?
I think they did a remarkable job in each generations. From the topic of being gay or lesbian wasn't really a big topic in the early 90s. It was known, but it was like a different subject. Like if you're gay, oh, you have AIDS. Oh, you do this, that's, if they're like, did you do something or you're weird, they don't, or their parents shun them.
Mm,
And then later on, it was more the same thing, but people are more welcoming.
yeah,
Like, like the Marco and Tristan, people still like them. They didn't like, I mean, there were still haters, but they didn't show too much of it,
yeah, I agree.
because I think they just did that's a very touchy subject. But I'm telling you, they take these subjects, Linda and Steven, and just like squash it and like know how to like do it without like talked about in a good kind of way, and but still being educational for people, like this is okay to be this is okay to be that.
I agree. I think they're very good at taking like sensational headlines and putting real humans behind them, and those
Mm.
moments where people are against it isn't like they're right. It's just like this is another opinion that people have. It might not necessarily be the right opinion, but it is what people think and it is what you actually have to deal with. So I do think they do good at that. Let's start with our first confirmed queer character on the show ever in Degrassi, which is Glenn Simpson, Mr. Simpson's brother. My key takeaway is that I think it was great that they had a queer character on the show, but I was disappointed that it wasn't a high school student. I totally get that it was a little too
Yeah.
early for them to have kids be coming out on the show, but that retrospectively looking back, I do wish it was a maybe a more younger student. But what do you think about Glenn Simpson?
I agree that it should have been high school, but also on the other hand, flip side, it opens up more to our character Snake and
Mm,
what his lifestyle is. So I'm kind of glad they probably like, because we didn't really know much about his family in Degrassi Junior High early on when we're introduced to him. So
yeah,
when we introduce his brother, then we get to see his parents. So yes, they should have done teenage, but we get to know more Snake, and now we know even more Snake later on in the years, like
I
because
agree.
that's my take on it.
I agree. I
But
do wish later they brought Glenn back, even for like an episode, even if he literally was just like at his wedding to Spike or something.
Mhm.
I wish we did get something with that, especially when later, when Mr. Simpson connects to Eli over the fact that Simpson found Claude. I think it would have been amazing if he had connected with like Marco or someone or Tristan or
Mhm.
someone over like, oh yeah, I have a
Mhm.
brother who's gay, and it like was hard at
Yeah,
first, and now it's fine. It could be great.
yeah.
We don't get any more queer characters in Degrassi Junior High or Degrassi High, but then in season 2-ish, 3-ish of Degrassi: The Next Generation, we get Marco, who is really the first Degrassi student to come out on the show. What I loved about Marco's storyline is I loved that we stayed with him for so long versus Glenn, who was one episode. We like got to hear he like dated girls and it wasn't right, and then he like found a boyfriend, and we got to see what it was like when you break up with your forced boyfriend and have to keep coming out. But my
Mhm.
biggest criticism, I think, of Marco's storyline is him and Dylan they weren't a very touchy sexual couple. Like I feel like with other, like for example Claire Edwards, every time she even looks at a boy, it's like, oh my god, am I gonna sleep with him? This is like affects everything about me. But when it came to Marco and Dylan, they didn't really talk about what it meant to have sex for the first time, and they weren't very touchy feely. We didn't see them kiss a lot.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that would be my main criticism. They put a gay character on TV, but they didn't treat him the same as their
Yeah.
straight characters.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I agree with that. I mean, we see they talk about it during the like, oh, if I had sex with another male,
Mm,
and like they don't even talk about. I mean, he doesn't. They talk about it, but he doesn't really say anything. And it's like he gets shown. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was a touchy subject at that time frame for Linda to like have them like be touchy feeling,
mm.
because I know later on they kind of showed it more in the Degrassi later season 10 and 11 when they brought more queer characters out, but they should have done more with that
Yeah.
because Marco, I mean, I don't even think when he started dating, what's his name? In college years.
Tim?
Um, no, not him.
Eric?
The Eric, yes,
Eric.
Eric. I don't even think they even showed touchy feeling with him either. Which
No.
since Marco was on, they should have done like more kissing and stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe it had to do with something to do with the audience base. Maybe people were, I don't know. It could be,
Yeah.
but they should, yeah, because Marco was a big character later on,
Yeah.
like
Let him be
more
cute with
than
his
Glenn
boyfriend.
was.
Cuddle up at like a movie theater or something. Put your hands in the popcorn.
Well,
Something
they
cute.
did do that. I mean, they did hold hands, but they didn't really
Not
talk
the
about.
same.
Maybe it was uncomfortable to do a scene about gay sex. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I wonder if the broadcasters, because I do know that
Yes.
even the one with Caitlin and Miss Avery, where there's not even
Yeah.
like a confirmed queer person in that episode, got banned. So
Yeah.
I'm curious. Maybe they just had
It
to.
could maybe it did that could also be the part of it. It could be the protection.
Yeah. Next is Paige and Alex. I was very excited to get our first girl storyline, but I will say because Paige never really talked about her sexuality, it left me really confused actually as a queer kid watching the show. I didn't really
Mhm.
like understand their relationship. That is what some relationships look like, but I think Degrassi maybe should have had like a confirmed lesbian character first, and then we can kind of show storylines where it's like, well, you don't have to
Mhm.
define it, da, da, da. Because I'm still kind of confused about Paige's sexuality and what was going on there.
Yeah, but I'm like, but well, Alex, I guess, called bi because she dated all those guys too, but then
Yeah.
was in a relationship with her. Maybe they did it because they needed a storyline for her.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the reason why. But I really liked how that relationship grew because we got to see Alex more open up more. And like she was like later in the early years of Next Generation, she was shown just like a sidekick and a bully and stuff. But when she met Marco and Vice President, and she grew like, and she knew that Jay was like hooking up with all those girls, she like we saw her open up more. And then when her and Paige got connected at the job site at the movie theater, that even showed even more of Alex being, hey, she's not a bad character.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I agree with you 100% with the confusion of her sexuality because maybe that was the whole point
Yeah.
of
Super
the
true.
story, but I just like the fact that we got to see Alex open up more and she was more of a character later down. I liked her. I liked what's her the character's, I forgot her real name, but the one that plays Alex, but I
Deanna,
like, yeah, Deanna. She is just a remarkable actor.
she's so cool. I did love Paige and Alex. As a little queer girl watching, I did love them. And now that I've been to Zanzibar too, I'm like, wow, I feel so much more wrapped up in their storyline.
Oh my god. That
I
was
loved it. I was like, Lexi, where are you? Um,
great.
the very next one to talk about, I mean, there are definitely more queer characters in the show, but more like these are the main staples,
Yes.
is Riley. Now, I liked Riley's storyline because, in contrast to Marco's, I think Marco struggled with coming out mostly because of how other people felt about it. Whereas I feel
Hmm.
like Riley definitely had like his mom and stuff that was judgmental, but he was more like an internalized, I don't want to be this way, I want to change who I am. Whereas Marco
Hmm.
was kind of like, well, how come I can't be myself around you? That kind of thing. So I
Hmm.
like that they had established Marco as a character, and then now they could kind of change the coming out story to show something different.
Hmm.
What do you think about
Hmm.
Riley?
I think Riley, the reason behind his like I don't want to be this way is because he was more of a jock where Marco wasn't.
Mm,
So he was trying to fit in with the athletes, and if he was this way, he'd be shunned, which when they found out they did, some of them did make. But I think that's the reason why big behind it. I don't think he really wanted to change what he was. He just because he was athlete and he wanted to be popular,
mm.
he didn't want the guys to like shun him, but then that turned out another story. But i think I think that's what I believe, because he was more an athletic, athletes, you're
Yeah.
gay, you want to change because you don't want to be that person, correct? So
Yeah. I totally
yeah.
agree.
And where Marco, like, he wasn't, I'm not saying he wasn't athletic, but he wasn't in that being an athlete at Degrassi. He was more into like drama and like being the president and stuff. So that's why he's like he didn't want to. He just doesn't. He was confused what to do.
I agree. I totally agree. I think it's interesting to compare him to Marco, and you get those kind of two points of view of how it can be so different for everybody. I love
Mm-hmm.
that. Someone that we didn't actually have on our original list, I do think we should talk
Mm-hmm.
about is Adam Torres. So what I
Mm-hmm.
loved about Adam is especially that, okay, what I loved about Adam is similar to what I loved about Lola, is how she came into her storyline and said, I'm getting abortion. I don't care what other people think. And when we
Mm-hmm.
meet Adam, he's like, I'm trans. I don't care what
Mm-hmm.
other people think. This is who I am. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that we got such an in-depth storyline from him, but I
Mm-hmm.
hate that they killed him off. I think they should have just transferred him to another school or something. I think it's a disservice to kill off your one
Yes.
trans character.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
what do you think about Adam?
I really liked how they finally went. I mean, they talked about gay and lesbians, and I liked how they finally introduced something different, because at that time it was there being trans. I mean, it's more open now being transgender, but back then when Adam came out, it was just like people like, oh, I'm not a, I'm a girl, but I feel like I'm a boy, and I'm kind of glad they introduced Jordan Tossie rocks, by the way, in case
Yeah,
she
she's the
listens to
best.
this. But I'm kind of glad they introduced it, because then you even see, and they even went into the with that one episode where can Gracie just come to dinner to make sure Grandma is happy, but deep down inside they show like I don't want I know I'm not this. But then I liked how at the end they buried Gracie and kept Adam alive, and they just went on from there.
I did love that. I know. I love how deep we got into go to that storyline and not something like Glenn, where it was just like, okay, here's a trans person for one episode and then we forget about them. One of the last ones we're going to talk about is the end of Degrassi Next Generation, Next Class era is Tristan. I loved Tristan because he was the very first queer character we had that didn't really have to come out, or at least a main character that didn't have to
Mm-hmm,
come out. He
mm-hmm.
just showed up gay. And I think that set the precedence for the future. Later, they kind of were able to get into more complex things like Zoe and Rasha. Now you have like religion getting into coming out instead of now
Yep.
these storylines of just being gay weren't really a thing anymore. So I think that Tristan paved the way for kind of the new era of queer storytelling where they could get a lot more complex and deep and nuance into the conflict. What do you think about Tristan?
I like Tristan. Like he, I'm telling you, you watch him from like season 13 or 14, wherever he came in. And he was like this chubby little kid, and then he grew into like this tall guy, and I don't know, when he started dating Miles.
Mm.
I mean, they had a rocky relationship because Miles is confused, because just like Paige and stuff. But then I liked how in the next class they showed more. Should I say? I don't know if the word PDA is the right word,
Yeah.
but I think they showed more of that where they should have done that with Marco, but I think it's because of the times.
Yep.
And maybe because of the network, maybe Netflix, because Netflix can show that stuff more
Exactly.
than the other ones. So I think Tristan was a good way of, like, they didn't have to hide anything
I
right there.
agree.
Like, it was more, and it was later in the year, and yeah, religion does get in the way. Like, oh, I can't, especially in their culture, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
I
Yeah,
think Tristan was a awesome, and he was a good best friend to Maya and stuff. And
I agree. I like Tristan. I liked in terms of the PDA stuff, like even with VJ, they were like making out in the like student council room together. It was very like casual. I love that Miles and Tristan talk about what it means to hook up for the first time, what kind of
mm-hmm.
protection they're going to use, how it changes their feelings. Like that is the kind of stuff that it was too early to get from Marco, but I wish we'd kind of gotten early. I think
I
Tristan
know.
changed the game.
But maybe, like you said, maybe it was the network that they were filming on Next Generation, because the next class, that's when we saw it all, was on Netflix. And Netflix is, they don't hide anything. If you
Exactly.
watch Netflix.
I'm curious if a Degrassi reboot came back, what do you think queer storylines would look like on Degrassi today?
I think, like Tristan, just they don't have to hide. They'd be
Mhm.
more open, maybe see transgender people hooking up more, and just I think it'd be more open.
Yeah, I agree. I think they would have a wider scope of identities to
Yes.
explore. I
Yes.
think when it comes to like gay and lesbian type of bisexual storylines, I think those would probably be easy for Degrassi to tell. Like, I feel like they would just kind of be part of the culture, like Tristan's storyline and stuff was. But I think when it comes to like trans and non-binary experiences, I think given again the state of the current world, those would probably have a lot more anger inside of them
Mhm.
based on everything that's happening. So I think those
Mhm.
would probably be the main focus more so than queer storylines. I think everybody's over the gay thing now. I think we're all just like, yeah, whatever.
But that, I think the reboot, they will explore more, not just being in the LPG community,
Yeah.
transgender, cross dressers, whatever you want to be. It's like,
Yeah. Do whatever you want. Now, those are the two topics that we are going into in depth, but are there any other topics that Degrassi has covered over and over again, just generally, that you think they did a really good job at?
um, I know we're not supposed to, but I'm just gonna say just suicide. They did,
Yep.
but we won't go into depth because it's a touchy subject. But I think they did a good job on that. Also, what was the other one? I think just like being online, I think they did a very good job on the internet and being safe on the internet. Like the Emma
Mm.
storyline, like that hooked me on Next Generation, even though that wasn't my error, but because the way they did it, it was remarkable. And then since they took that, then they went with Darcy
Mm.
meeting. So I think they did really good. How that's what internet is. You have to be careful online. Parents really need to pay attention what their kids are doing online, because anyone can, like, freaking, you don't know what's behind the camera. You don't know who you're talking to. It could be like a 4-year-old pervert or something. So I think they was there another is and later on, I think there was a is there another
Did we
besides
talk?
Darcy and Emma? I would
Um,
say junior high, but internet wasn't that big back then. Um,
they did have Hunter pretending to be someone else. He wasn't necessarily
yes,
dangerous.
yes, yes.
Connor also had an
Oh,
online
Connor, that's
girlfriend.
right, Connor too. Yeah, so they
Yeah.
did that very, and Connor one was really, I liked it because yes, he was in the car, but then he like nope, I'm out of here. So they kind of
Yeah.
like gave that, because Emma was still young, so she didn't know. She did knew it was wrong, but she didn't know how to escape. But because she was, and I liked it was they always show it as a guy, but I liked that storyline because it was actually a woman. Because I'm like, it's not just always men; it could be women going after young. So
Yeah.
I liked how that storyline they made the I mean, I don't like that story. I don't like that kind of stuff, but I liked how the storyline was like, oh, yeah, a woman can't be a person online trying to go after young boys.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I know. I love when they establish kind of like the common story and then they flip the script and say, but also things like this can happen too. I think in the same topic as suicide and self-harm, mental health in general, I think Degrassi
Mhm.
crushed it. They
Yes.
had Stephanie K got depressed in Degrassi Junior High.
Right. Right.
We had, oh my God, so many kids. Like Maya's storyline even was really
I
great.
liked Craig's storyline where he had
Craig,
bipolar. I really loved that
Eli.
storyline.
Love that. Well, Jolene, we did it. We covered the two biggest topics, abortion and LGBT LGBTQ storylines on Degrassi. But now we want to hear about you. Tell us about where you're at in your friend's podcast.
Well, I just finished my introduction and I'm writing my script for my first episode plot pilot. So hopefully you guys will get to hear it soon. So hopefully you
I'm
guys all
so proud
listen.
of you.
And I hope you guys enjoy this podcast that me and Jocelyn recorded. So
We had
I know
fun.
it's a good one.
I'm excited because after this, me and Jolene are gonna talk about her next idea. So I'll get to know, and you guys will have to wait and see. But for now, Jolene, thank you for talking with me. Bye. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Jolene for being a sponsor of the Degrassi Kid podcast. Jolene, it was so cool to sit down and talk with you about another interesting subject. What's really amazing is Jolene has been a sponsor over and over and over again. She sponsors podcasts, she sponsors events. And if you want to be just like Jolene and become a sponsor, you can go to patreon.com/Degrassi Kid and you can look at the sponsorship tier. Basically, you get a post on the Degrassi Kid Patreon celebrating you for being a sponsor. We get to work on whatever kind of project you want to together, whether it's a podcast, event, or whether you want to help me with packages or anything else in the world. You can find all of that information at patreon.com/Degrassi Kid, and I'll be excited to work with you, just like I'm excited to work with Jolene every single month. Thank you so much, Jolene. We're also saying a welcome to our brand new Patreon subscribers. We're welcoming Louis Sacco and Julian Lynn to the Degrassi Kid Patreon. Thank you guys for signing up. That means so much to me. For now, we are going to say a thank you to everyone who has signed up over and over again every single month. Those thank yous are going to Amber, Angelica, Christopher, Degrassi CSI, Mundo Man 333, Nicholas, Nikki, Sarah J, Shannon, Alyssa, Angie, Becca, Billy, Blueberry, Bridget, Brittany, Katrina, Courtney, Dave, Evie Piscini, Emily, Gina, Jess, Joe, Joey, Catherine, Casey, Kristen, Layla, Laura. Oh my gosh, I always forget the double Laura. Liz, Lizzie, Megan, Mina, Rachel, Racine, Sarah, Sam, Stephanie, Tawny, Tay, Brittany, Cosmo, Darcy, Jess, Kennedy, Lindsay, Randy, Alana, Ashley, Chrissy, Emily, Glenn, Honey, Jamie, Kylea, Lizzie Games, Lulu, Mackenzie, MMB, Mix Lucy, Sarah, Shane, Sanita, and Tierney, who are all members of the Degrassi Kid Patreon. Thank you so much for all of your support. These projects are only possible because of people like you, and I love making them, so let's keep them coming. Okay, thank you. Bye.